I don't know.
Yeah, I've never had one. I've never had
Yeah. Welcome everybody to the 5th episode of Sea Talk. Basically here it's a podcast where we listen to the voice shaping the future of yachting. And today this voice is Lisa, that I met already in Panama, but we had some technical issues. So here we are in Paris, in the Jardin du Luxembourg. And Lisa, if you want to introduce yourself, your background with the yachting industry.
Perfect. So my name is Lisa Gould. I'm the owner of On Deck Yachting.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, I've been in the marine industry for over 20 years. And so, I've been a mate, I've been a captain, I've been a stew. Like I've done the whole entire thing. The last 7 years, I've done some research basically on the interior to kind of figure out where there's some gaps and things that need to be filled. We don't have any training, so that's why I started On Deck. So we basically will set up like SOPs, like we take care of like inventory, onboarding, making sure preferences are, great with the owners. We try to lower the turnover rate that we have in this industry, which is extremely high. Yes,
Absolutely.
So we want to keep people, not get rid of people, and and just making the owners kind of feel more comfortable, and also the captains to feel more comfortable and have support. So we also do crew development tracking. So basically, we're really big into the mental health and making sure that everyone on board is getting along, and that basically division of power. Nobody has.
I have the feeling actually that most of the startup or like new business that are entering in the market of the yachting industry, they are coming from whether anger or frustration. So it was your case, I guess, like some situation or people, whatever, might have like frustrated you. So that's why you studied that.
So basically, I mean, there's so many issues. There's no HR. Who do you go to vent? Who do you go with problems? And who teaches you? Who are the leaders in our industry? And leadership is something that you have to learn and research, and then also innately have it inside of you. And so a lot of these heads of departments really don't have that. They don't have the support. They don't, really have the time either, because yachting is just a very transient industry. We're like back to back to back. So it's like, to really look at yachting as a career, people don't take the time to actually do research of like, how can I make this program better? And so, so basically there's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes that, owners don't see, captains don't see, crew don't see. It's for everybody.
And it also comes to the question, like, who is actually willing to act in case we identify an issue?
Correct. And that's going to be the most difficult. And so basically that's why On Deck is really starting to promote itself, because we're bringing accountability basically for everybody. And so we want to stop all the bad things that are happening behind the scenes,
Obviously. I mean, the thing is, like, we have now around like 8,000 vessels out there. Obviously not like 100% of them are going to be like good working environments, but we need to be sure that the right people, so the proper professional, end up on the right vessel.
Correct.
So we need to identify who are those right vessels, and who are those guys that are willing to do things right,
or really just having the accountability part, because I feel like it's a free-for-all. Who does the captain go to? He's ultimately, or she is ultimately, in charge of everything. They don't have anyone to so they can do whatever they want and whatever they want. And so basically that becomes a problem, and that's why we kind of have to mimic corporations on land and kind of integrate it into yachting, because you're giving someone way too much power. And when you do that, it's just innately in everyone to kind of, their ego takes over. They start doing things because who's going to catch them? Who's going to tell them no? It would have to be something drastic for them to even get out of it.
Well, I would hope that maybe sometime, like management company, they would, be involved in this choice of like stopping them and whatever. But the reality is that on the ground, it rarely happens.
Well, it's hard for management companies, and this is one thing that I've researched over really the past year, because I used to blame management companies. I used to say, oh my God, they're not getting involved with crew. We're having all these issues. Who's supporting us? And if you do tell them a problem, they fire you immediately. So it becomes an issue on that. And so when I really started researching management companies, they don't really deal with onboarding. They're not on board. They don't know the drama that's there. All they can go based on is what the captain says, you know? So whoever the higher ups are, who's going to be listened to. Anyone lower from that is not going to be listened to, unfortunately. It just goes, you know, based on hierarchy, which kind of sucks. So they only deal with like compliance. They, you know, make sure flag states are going accordingly. They're making sure that, you know, all the paperwork's all set for insurances, making sure all the crew has all their, you know, paperwork all in order. They're not on the vessel. I mean, when's the last time you've ever really seen a management company come on board?
I don't know.
I've never had one. I've never had one. So
well,
you know, it sucks because then they don't see what's going on. And
Yeah.
a lot of those people, you know, you have the gatekeepers that are in our industry that we all know about. So they are each other's friends. So, and it's difficult because you can be friends and not work with each other. And so when you have that, it becomes difficult because then your friends think that you're the greatest person ever, but then you could actually be treating people in the crew very differently because you guys are at the same level. You've never worked with each other. You wouldn't work under that person. And so that kind of makes it difficult. So now they've built a friendship of that type of thing. And, you know, and they're like, no, my buddy would never do that. You know, like, no, that can't be true. That's not who he is. You know, or she is, or, you know, anything like that.
Or sometimes they are just like absolutely aware of the way those people behave.
Yeah, they could be.
They just don't stop them.
Yeah.
Because
they'd rather not have issues.
How can I call it, like partnership between manager and captain protecting themselves, you know, like, so that's where it becomes very tricky when the captain and the management work together hand in hands to actually have bad behavior regarding like the way we're gonna treat the crew that are like under them.
Well, it's such a like a 50-50 on that because I know, or in my experience and people that I've interviewed and talked to, you know, there's also a disconnect between captains and management companies. You know, there's a huge disconnect in there. They act like they're friends, but in reality, there's a lot of things that need to be like resolved. So I totally get it. And they both have the same thing. They don't want nothing to get back to the owners. So nothing should get back to the owners. That's, you know, that's why you hire people in place. Owners don't hire, you know, people to run their operation to hear about the drama. And so that's one thing that they do have in common is that bad stuff cannot get to the owners.
Yeah, no, obviously, but in the same, you know, like the thing is the owner is still responsible somehow for the well-being of the person working for them.
Correct.
You know, we should at least educate them on the issue that we would face on a vessel and teach them how to react with that. You know, like actually sometimes I had very, very supportive owners when I was facing issues like sexual harassment from captain, and they would understand the situation and still like, I mean, give you, I had an example. They would give you like 2 months of bonus. So you would accept to leave the vessel to find another job.
Yeah.
So they will feel like so sorry for you, but since they're not educated in like how should I react, still it's so much more simple for them to just let you go. Okay, they give you money. Okay, they assist you in the process, whatever. But guys, you should understand that actually, if you identify a perpetrator on the vessel, you should remove that person, not remove the person that is the victim of that guy.
Correct. And that's where the tricky part comes because we're a pleasure craft.
Yeah.
It doesn't, you know, doesn't negate the fact that we shouldn't be treated like real employees, but in the eyes of owners, the things that I've interviewed and it was just kind of getting out on what I've collected on myself is that we're not really viewed as employees because, you know, we're a pleasure craft. It's like a server or a waiter. You know, you don't really look at them as like, okay, well, there's a dime a dozen. They're doing that kind of same concept with yachting, which has to stop because it's just ruining the vessel. You're actually losing a lot of money. It's a lot of money that you're losing. This is an asset that, yes, it eventually starts off as a pleasure craft, but it also has to be looked at as an investment in a piece. It's just like a piece of art. You know, you want to keep it, maintain it, make sure that it's in immaculate condition so that later on, if you do choose to sell it, then you can at least make something from it instead of, you know, just having it and then not taking care of it. And then because the crew is the engine of the program, they can ruin or not ruin your vessel, 100%. Especially when it comes down to reselling at the end of the day, or if you're chartering and you're trying to offset costs. And so the thing is that owners typically look at buying yacht as like your first car. It's like a Ferrari or, you know, whatever nice car that you want to talk about. It's like, oh my God, it's so great. But they don't talk about the logistics that go behind everything. And now we're starting to see it because we're seeing owners sell their boats between 3 to 5 years. And it's mostly because either A, it's crew, you know, it's the turnover rate. They don't like turnover. They like consistency. Regardless. And so like when you have captains giving, you know, the same, oh, it's so normal that crew turns over. No, it's not normal. People, it's just like on land. People don't leave good jobs, period. They will stay and they will even take a pay cut. If you treat your employees so well, they will stay no matter what.
100%.
And then you have the, you know, basically when you're selling the boat, if you're telling them the, you know, running cost is, you know, 5 to 10%. I mean, you're just lying to these people. They're going to find out once they purchase the boat and they realize that it's going to be significantly more than that. And now those costs are like crazy.
No, definitely. I was interviewing a captain that was telling me that most of the time, because we have big corporations that are handling the management part, but also the brokerage part. And when you face one of those employees that are like, okay, I'm going to sell you the boat, and like some other people in my company, they can manage the vessel. And the thing is, like, there's some kind of like an agreement. They're going to be like, okay, if you buy the boat with me, the management cost is going to be this much, or like the operation cost, whatever. So then together they set the budget, and then they're operating on a very, very tight budget because at the very beginning, the broker didn't do his job of being transparent on how much it's going to be costing. And the first area where they're going to cut costs, I mean, money, is actually the crew member department, which is a proper issue.
Yeah, it's a huge issue. I mean, that's where a majority of the money is, you know, like you're having salaries, then you're having health benefits, then you're having, you know, cost of food, then you're also tagging into uniforms and things that they need on board. And all of that, they're little costs that you can kind of hide for the time being, but at the end, when you're doing budgeting, it becomes a big cost. So that's why paying attention to crew and making sure you don't have that crew turnover and having the right people and also the people and giving them also support. And that's what On Deck wants to do, especially when it comes down to with the crew, with, you know, the heads of department. We want to support you. So if you're having issues, come to us, let us know what the problem is. Let's try to solve it. Also guiding them in how to shop, how to make sure you're conserving money instead of just because you have a credit card in your hand, you can just go buy whatever. And then everyone has a different method of how they do all this stuff. So whenever you walk on a vessel, like how many times you're like, there's so much crap around that nobody really needs. And it's because you're taking everyone's like everyday self that didn't grow up with money to come in and try to figure out how to basically run something. And, you know, and that's a problem.
And there is also the dimension that if you have turnover, the thing is, let's say, I've been a chef, okay? You arrive, you have your, you know, habits and things, you want your equipment, so you're gonna buy equipment. The next chef don't need your equipment, so they're gonna buy them, you know, like, and I think it's gonna be the same with like the size of the uniform. The more you're gonna change people, the more you're gonna have to buy like the shoes, the thing, the whatever. So like, they don't realize all those little things. At the end of the day, they have like a very, very big impact.
Yeah, it is a huge impact, and it needs to be regulated. And also too, what I've noticed in the industry is that's the whole point of On Deck as well, is dividing power. You're giving a little piece of the power to everybody. So if something doesn't align, the whole program's not falling apart. Which is, you know, and then it also brings accountability for everybody. You know, On Deck doesn't want to go on and say, hey, we're in charge, this is what we're doing. No, we're just a piece of the pie to make sure that everyone's doing what they're supposed to, everyone's getting the support that they need, owners are getting exactly what they want. Because in reality, owners, when you have that kind of money, you don't complain. Like, you might say little things here and there, but at the norm, you'll keep it in and you're like, this is just not working for me. And so instead of, you know, how many people get fired because the owners don't really want them around because they're not doing what they're asked to do, but but no one's relaying what needs to be done. So you're just firing these people and then they're going on the next boat doing the same thing. And then the rotation hits, and by the time you have 7 years under you and you're a chief stew or you're a first officer, but really you have no training, you just took in your bad habits from every other boat. Now you just have the years under you, and that's it. You don't really have like the methods, or how many people actually sit down. I actually have read 20 billion leadership books because I want to be able to read people. I want to be able to lead them and making sure that people are getting the support that they need. If you ask anybody, I mean, I've interviewed over hundreds of people and nobody really knows what their position entails, which is it's so mind-boggling.
I identify that as well.
That's crazy. Insane. If you ask a third stew, second stew, chief stew, first mate, deckhand, anybody, they have no idea like what their role is. And they'll say certain things. It's like, oh, I have to do this and this. And it's like, okay, but what else? Like get into like how do you categorize things within the vessel? So if you're going to have, if you're following the ladder up, what is that ladder? What does this section do? What does this? You all have a part to it. And so I always try to train people to let them know what your role entails and what you're responsible for, because the heads of the department ultimately is responsible for everything. Yeah. But if something fails down below, that's you. That's not the second, third, fourth, fifth stew. That's you. You're not a leader. They are failing because you're not teaching them, or they're not getting the support that they need. And I'm not saying everybody, but I will say majority of them are not. There's a few 10% people that are just there just to get a paycheck. They watch Below Deck. They're like, oh, this is so cool. I just want to be here. You'll have those people for sure. But a majority of people really want to be good at their job. Yeah. They really do, but they don't have the support for it. So.
And every time I was on vessel where you try to implement like a high standard for professionalism, you become the target.
Correct.
I've been on a vessel where the captain was an alcoholic, a drug addict, and whatever. And story short, we were supposed to have like 1 month to prepare the vessel. And at the end of the day, management calls like, honors are coming in 5 days. Mm-hmm. We had 5 days to literally prepare the entire vessel, and I knew how much I had to do in the galley. The boat was like 10-year-old, like the interior was destroyed. We need to change everything. It was not reasonable.
Yeah.
So I speak to the management, I explain them the situation and whatever, but honors are coming anyway, whatever. So I started to work like non-stop, night and days, to be ready in 5 days, which is like mission impossible. You know what I mean? We managed, but yeah, it was really intense, and I shared that with the captain. Essentially, for like those 5 days, he went in his cabin, hangover, because he was going out every single night. Yeah. And this guy, where I was like, wow, it was very intense. He's like, from his little bed, you're not ready for yachting. Yeah. Okay, yeah, well.
Yeah.
So when you face this kind of situation,
it's hard because that's the master. We're supposed to call them the master of the vessel. Yeah. So, there's different, again, within titles. It's, it's funny. You have a lot of people that don't have the right tickets that are calling themselves first officers. It's the same thing with captains. There's a captain and there's a master of the vessel. Captains are people I feel like are still learning and like getting their credentials, figuring out how to run a team. A master of the vessel has mastered everything. Yeah. They know navigation, they know safety, they know their crew, they know how to be a leader. There's a massive difference. Mm-hmm. And so like with captains, you need a license to run the vessel. And so how many captains are there really? There's certain licensings that you have to have for certain size vessels. So if your pool is like only, I'm just giving a number, like 5, versus you had hundreds. If you had hundreds, I think there'd be a lot more accountabilities for captains. So when they're drinking on the job, not showing up, I had a captain a long time ago. He was an alcoholic as well. He was so drunk that he forgot to pick up the charter guest the next day. And of course he got fired. Yeah. Well, he got fired, but then he got a job on a bigger vessel, which is insane. Literally like 4 days later. So,
but the thing is, like the reference system comes like top down.
Yeah,
it should also come like bottom up.
Exactly.
Because as a crew member, you're able to identify a good leader, a good person.
Correct. Yeah. So it comes down to your CVs. I'm very big into that because I think people look at CVs. There should be a different tier for every single level of yachting, of who you are, of how you're going to interview. Yeah. And so basically, if you don't have those tiers, they're pretty much all the same right now. It's like, oh, how many years have you been in there? Great. That's it. You're hired. If you look good, you're pretty, or, whatever, you got the job. And it shouldn't be like that. It's really asking hard questions, definitely when it comes down to like HODs. You have to have those questions to be very, very focused into leadership.
Yeah.
How do they handle problems? Like, how do you budget everything that you're doing? You know, you can't just be like, yeah, I've just been a chief stew for 7 years, and yeah, I just am here. You know, you can't do that. Like, you have to actually put some like meat into what you're doing. Like, what have you actually taken your job as a career instead of, you know? And the same thing, you get a lot of first officers who think they don't even have their certificates to call them first officers. They're calling themselves first officers, and they're trying to act like the captain, and they just sit in the wheelhouse and they don't want to do anything.
No,
you know, like
obviously.
they just like to dictate.
And so many of them are just like taking shortcuts.
A lot of them take shortcuts, and a lot of them get signed off. A lot of them, I mean, that's part of the industry, you know. It's definitely much harder for women when it comes down to that, you know, getting your sea time and things like that. But and the thing is it's not really being regulated on the, you know, MCA or Coast Guard, like who's regulating, like, how are you actually getting your hours, you know, like. And so I've had a lot of captains that, you know, that I've worked with that have been super great. But there's been a lot of captains that have a struggle docking a boat.
Yeah.
You know, you'll be amazed.
I saw someone, oh yeah, no.
You know, because docking a boat is hard. Driving a boat on autopilot, super easy. But when you have to go dock under hard currents, winds, and all that, it becomes, that's when you know you're a true master, or, you know, a captain of a vessel, is based on how you handle your vessel in, you know, very tight situations like that.
No, obviously.
And so, yeah, so basically, I mean, I'm loving our industry now because I'm older, and I actually look at my career as a career, not just a stepping stone. And I think we have a lot of misfits that come into the industry. You know, it goes the same thing with chefing. You know, if you're not making things from scratch and you're making everything from a box, you're not a chef.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm not trying to be mean or degrading, but it's like, we're dealing with multi-millionaires to billionaires on these vessels, and if you're cooking everything from a box, it's not inappropriate unless the owner actually says, hey, I want these can of beans, you know. And you'll have chefs on the other hand who have gone through all this schooling, and then you have these owners that are like, I just want this can of beans, and they get upset and won't do it. So
it's like all about finding the right match. The thing is, as a chef, I work in like Michelin star restaurants, so I was expecting all my owners to expect this kind of like standards.
Yeah.
I worked in a vessel for American people, and they were expecting me to cook burgers. The thing is, that's not the type of cooking that I like.
Yeah.
So I would go to them like, guys, I really appreciate you and whatever, but I don't enjoy this type of cooking. So just find the right match for you, you know?
Yeah.
So otherwise, frustration is going to be on my side or on yours, like if I continue cooking what I like. So it's all about understanding. It's not just like, okay, how many years, what the salary, whatever. There is so many extra layers that we need to figure out and understand to properly match a crew, a vessel, and an owner.
And with an owner, yeah. And I think that's very, very important, because you're right. And that's what makes yachting so amazing, is that there's so many different personalities.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't matter who you are. If you're an introvert, an extrovert, or like you were saying, you don't like cooking burgers and stuff. So most likely you're not going to work for an American family who likes that traditional burger and hot dogs and, you know, things like that. And that should be your choice. And then it also should be the owner's choice to either have you or not have you. You know what I'm saying? So like, it's the same thing with the entire crew.
Yeah.
I think it's just harder when you get up to like a higher level as a captain. Captains are just harder to replace. So if that's the issues, then we have to implement something. And that's one of the reasons why I want to implement on deck. And it's also to support captains.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with the captains. They're going through the same type of stress level. Who do they get to go to, like, vent? And, you know, and that drives them to drink because they can't be home with their wives or their girlfriends or their family at home. You know, we're all on this vessel and we're on with each other 24/7. And normally if you're on a charter or a heavy owner use, it's back to back to back. So you have no free time. So when you do that to someone and then they have no out or no way to, like, because captains can't go to crew and just start venting. That doesn't work. That's your leader. Same thing with HODs. You can't go and who do you like complain about? Especially when, you know, the chief stew and the first officers don't really want to work together. They think they're completely different, separate departments, and they are when it comes down to exterior and an interior. But they work together and they need to collide together. Those two should be talking together and venting with each other and figuring out how solutions and like doing that. And I had one first officer that actually did that. We ended up talking in the wheelhouse, and he sat me down. He's like, let's talk about these problems. And I was just blown away and shocked, and actually valued it so much, because I was like, wow, I was like, this feels good. So now we feel like we're conquering something and everyone's being heard. And in all my years, I've never had that until recently. And it was, and then at the same time, he knew the problems that were happening on the vessel, and I knew the problems. And it's just one of those things. It's like, what are you going to tolerate? Because there's nothing we can do at that point, because now it's the management company. And, you know, and at that point, the captain didn't have a say either, which was crazy. It was just...
You were speaking about the understanding of like the crew member with their own task, but the thing is, the understanding, I like to say, it must come from also the understanding between departments. You know, the thing is, like, if yourself as a student, you're not able to identify what are your tasks, how do you expect the engineer or like the chief officer or the captain to understand what you're supposed to do?
Correct.
You know, and the respect is gonna come from understanding.
Yeah.
You know?
Correct. And I think everyone needs to understand everyone's role in their departments. You know, it's especially like, you know, for instance, engineers coming on board, they're doing a bulk of their work during yard period or when we're sitting on land. They can't do a lot. They should not be doing a lot during a trip, because if they are,
there is an issue.
There is a problem. You know? So like, of course, you know, you have, and I've heard crews say like, oh my God, these engineers are so lazy. They just sit there. I'm like, I hope they're just sitting there during a trip. They're there for emergency only, to make sure the boat doesn't sink, to make sure that we're running properly, to make sure that we can anchor properly, all of those types of things. And knowing that they're putting way more hours on land than they would be during a trip. And so if you don't sit and actually talk about that as a group, they're just looking at the engineers. Why are we splitting tips with the engineer? Why are we doing this? And then they're kind of getting the back end. And then you have engineers who are really not qualified to be engineers. I had an engineer who came on that couldn't fix anything. All he knew how to do was pick up a phone and try to call a vendor. And I'm like thinking to myself, okay, the owner's paying you a bunch of money, but you can't even change a panel. Like, you know, those types of things make a massive difference. So like, you have pros and cons on both sides for everywhere. And the one thing that is similar and is exactly the same for every single buddy, there is no support system. Where's the training? Who supports them? Is there really any of that? And that's really what On Deck wants to bring. It wants to bring that unity. We want to protect captains. We want to protect crew. We want to protect brokers and management companies. We want to bring it together as a group, and that we stick together as a team.
By protecting those people, you're going to protect the owners.
And you're correct. And then the owners are definitely protected. And then we also want to protect everybody from owners. I mean, this isn't just a one-sided thing. There are bad owners out there, you know, who don't care. I mean, I had a friend who, you know, unfortunately was raped on board, and, you know, they didn't fire her, but they knew about it, and they wouldn't get rid of the guy who did it. So of course she quit, and he's still working on board.
You can't work with your perpetrator.
Correct.
It's
and
impossible.
it's impossible to do that.
Like, the first reaction you want to have is go away.
And the owners knew about it, so they don't care. What they care is that the vessel's running. And so that's where the accountability, and that's the things with like Paige Bell, you know, when she gets murdered on board, does it really have to go to that extreme for people to actually start sticking up for things and like saying this is right and this is wrong? I mean, I get it. It's a pleasure craft. We're not much as protected, you know, on land than we are on the water. But we shouldn't let something like Paige Bell, who got murdered on a boat, like, have to get to that extreme to protect crew,
obviously,
basically. So
there is this event with Paige Bell and everything, and there is also the fact that a lot of former crew members, just like you and me, we are not trying to act, and because we act, then the entire industry is waking up. Oh wow, former crew are trying to do things. We're gonna, try to move before they do.
Correct. Yeah, those are the gatekeepers, because they want to keep everything in control, and they don't want anything to get past. And when they see this uprise, which we are having an uprise in yachting, because people are starting to say, hey, this is not okay. We need support. And it's falling down to that owners are just selling the vessel. I mean, look at these boat shows. They're out of control. Like, yes, it's great to see a great boat show, but that also says a lot of people are for sale. Why are we for sale? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's one of those like catch 22 type deal. It's like, you do want a huge boat show, but at the same time you don't, because then you're seeing that people are transitioning and selling, and there's a reason for that. And so you always have to follow you have to follow the reason of why things are falling apart.
Obviously.
it's all in front of you. You just have to read it and go and hopefully protect it and stop people from doing the things that they're not supposed to do in yachting.
Yeah, I feel like, I mean, when I entered the industry, I was like 25. And with the experience, the expertise, like you are finally able to ask the right question.
Yeah.
But the thing is, I've never been asked the right question. You know, in a process of like an interview or something, like I've never been asked a single relevant question on my profile and whatever.
No.
So,
and it's funny because a lot of people think I'm one of the hardest interviewers because I will ask you some really hard questions, you know, and when my crew underneath me, I actually have this whole crew development thing that I would print out and say, I would like you to answer these questions because I need to know where your mind's at, you know, and that's the point of an HOD. You can't sit there and, you know, this is one thing that I hated hearing is everyone always said, stop talking about what you did on your last boat. We don't care. Our boat does it this way. I get that to an extent, but at the same time, I do need to know what you did on your last boat because then I know where your thought process is. That's why you're doing what you're doing. You're carrying over your experience from another boat onto a new boat. Everyone does it. I don't care if you're an HOD, captain, deckhand, you know, lower stew. Like you are definitely taking your experiences and shifting it forward with you. So you have to understand where people are coming from. And then maybe you can, you know, tweak it and say, hey, on this boat, we're not going to do it because of this. If you don't have a why with things, people can't, they're not going to comprehend it. They're not, they're like, okay, whatever. You're just dictating. And when you become a dictator on boat, the crew are not going to listen to you. You think they're listening to you, but in reality, they're doing a lot of stuff behind you that like make you upset. You know what I'm saying? Like they're going to interact with you in the way you interact with them. So do not create an environment and then get mad at the environment for reacting, which I did an article on that because it's such a true statement. Like, don't create this hostile environment and then get mad at the people for reacting to the hostility. And now they're the crazy ones. Now you created it.
This is actually the definition of leadership for me, is when the people working for you or with you are gonna speak in a good way about you when you're actually not there. That's where you identify if the person is a good leader.
Correct. Exactly. There should be no, you know, and that's the other thing. Like I, you know, I've said this in other podcasts. I actually was on this like platform that we were talking about firing people and things like that. And, you know, you have to be able to let people fight. And, you know, one of the podcasts that I was on, it was great to hear because you have to have, and he said it perfectly, you have to have a 90-day period. You have to go through that full 90 days, learn how to fight, get all those kinks out because we're learning each other. You can't just get on board and thinking within like 2 weeks, you know, there was a chef that I hated. Oh my gosh, we did not like each other when he got on board. I was like, are you kidding me? And then like after we became the best as the friends, you know what I'm saying? And it's like, you have to get those kinks out and understand each other's personalities, how things are being ran. And like, and the huge thing is the why behind it and making sure that everyone's basically focus is to make sure that the guests are getting what they want instead of what we want. You know, I never go into a charter or an ownership saying, this is what I've done past, you know, 20 years, so this is what I'm going to do. No, it's, hey, every charter and every guest is different. It's tailored to what they want. And you have to be able to change with that. If you can't change with that, you're going to struggle.
No, 100%. But also there is this emotion where, okay, let's say I'm doing an interview and I want to figure out what is the mentality of the vessel. I want to understand if people are into partying, if people, they have kids and whatever, you know, so I understand that you need to adapt, but also you can avoid some struggle if you find your good match.
Yeah. Correct.
So I work for people that were big into parties. That's not a right fit for me.
Yeah.
I love to wake up super early. I have people that are really into sport and work out and whatever, like eat their breakfast early. I love working for these people.
Yeah.
You know? So the one that will wake up at like 2 in the afternoon, that's not a right match for me, and I know that.
Yeah.
And like all kind of like vessel, and also the dimension of like, is it a sailboat? Is it a catamaran? Is it a motorboat? It's gonna have a lot of like elements that are indicators for you to understand what you're gonna face.
Yeah.
So
well, that's, you know, that goes into really understanding who you are, what you want, and what your, you know, what your qualifications give as well. But if you're looking at a boat, so for instance, if you don't want a party boat, you can tell immediately by walking on the boat if it's going to be a party boat or not.
100%.
Because if those fair leads aren't clean, the lines aren't tacked, you know what I mean? That's why it's so important for all crew interiorly need to understand the outside of the vessel. The outside of the vessel will tell you everything about that vessel. So if you notice that vessel is just looking raggedy, you know that's a party boat. Okay, you know that most likely that captain is not running a tight ship. And so like, so those are the things you pay attention to. So like when I always went for an interview, that's the first thing I did. I walked the boat all the way down, looked at all the fair leads, looked at how the lines, I looked at the size of the lines, I looked at the size of the fenders. Because when you look at those things, you'll see boats that actually buy lines that are smaller than what they're supposed to be, and you'll find them using fenders that are smaller than they're supposed to be. And there's certain signs that are on vessels that, you know, I won't get into, but there's one huge sign that you can tell if the owners have money or not, you know? And so those are all things that you have to look on the outside. That's why, you know, I kind of wrote this article on LinkedIn about, you know, who's the most important crew member. Everyone always fights, like the chef's the most important, the captain's the most important, the HODs are. It's like, no, the vessel itself, and this is when owners and guests are coming on, they're looking at the vessel itself. They're doing exactly what we should be doing on an interview. We come in and we're looking at that boat and we're like, we should be like, wow, this is beautiful. This is amazing. If we come to that boat and it looks crappy, the guests are going to get really upset. And now it doesn't matter if the interior or the chef is good, they're going to be pissed. It's so
100%.
like, you know, so the outside of the boat has to look good. So that's the most important part. Then when they get on board, it has to be the interior because it's the welcoming. You know, if you have that stiff, you know, and it depends on the charter guests. And that's the thing. That's the whole point of getting like preference sheets and reading the guests. You have the guests that are like, don't talk to me. I want your hands behind your back, you know, and only be spoken to when I speak to you. And then you have the other guests that actually want to interact and say like, oh, yay, this is so much fun. How are you? Want to know everything about you. So you have to mimic those guests. And so if the interior does not make the guests feel comfortable, then they're going to start nitpicking everything. And then now the chef has 20 billion times harder because now if they're mad about the inside and the outside, doesn't matter if the chef is like the best chef ever, they're going to be miserable at that table. And it ruins the whole entire thing. No, and then it sucks because if the outside of the boat and the inside's great and then the chef sucks, woo, that just ruined. The chef has the most weight on that.
Oh, no, for sure. Like most of the tip, for example, is going to come from like the food experience.
It is going to be because it's about sitting at that table and like creating memories and all of that stuff for sure. So, you know, does certain departments hold different weight? Yeah, but it's different weight in a lot of different things. You know, the interior like manages the guest 20 billion, they're there 24/7 with them. They know everything about them, their conversations that are having behind closed doors, everything to like develop and make this better. You know, chefs are behind the door so they don't get to see the guests. So that's where chefs and, you know, chief stews have to be able to like work together because the chief stews know what the guests are saying. So if they take that piece of information and say, hey, look, I don't think they like this style. Like I was on a vessel once and I remember the chef made, you know, they were from Europe somewhere. I can't remember where they were from in Europe, but they came from Europe. And so she was doing a Mediterranean type, you know, style for like breakfast and stuff. And they didn't want that. They actually wanted like pancakes and like waffles. They wanted to do something different because they're in the States. Well, we were in the Bahamas and they wanted something different. And so I, you know, told that chef, I was like, hey, maybe we should change it up. Why don't you go out there and ask them what they would like for breakfast and see, making sure everything's okay.
It's all about communication with them. Yeah, no, for sure.
No, and the chef had a heart attack. I was like, no, they like that. I'm not asking that. You're overstepping your boundaries. It's like, okay. And so these people are mad the whole time because they're not getting anything they want because you have the chefs that don't want to go out and talk to the table. And, you know, and it's really hard for guests also to go to a chef and say, hey, I don't like your food. You know what I'm saying? They're not saying they don't.
Uncomfortable,
it is uncomfortable,
you know,
but they're not going to do it. They're going
to
to make up a story at the table. And the chief stew is going to be listening. It's like, I was on this one boat and I hated crepes. And we're eating crepes. Okay, so you're going to take that piece of information, go back to the chef and say, we should not be making crepes. The guests don't like it. They didn't put that on their preference sheet. No, it shouldn't be an argument. It should be like, okay, let's adjust.
Acknowledged.
That's it.
Acknowledged. You know, like
it wasn't on the preference sheet. So yes, is the chef in the wrong? No, absolutely not. You can't put everyone's preference on a preference sheet. I know that sounds so crazy, but it's so true.
And according to like the season, according to the location and whatever, you're gonna want different things. You know, like you're in the
mood.
You want, you know, just like your Mediterranean style buffet, whatever. You arrive in the Bahamas, just like you said, you want your like grilled lobster and things like that. So we need to adapt and be flexible.
Correct.
A minimum.
Correct.
So yeah.
And then who's there to train that? Who's there to make sure that that happens? You know, so in every single department, it's the same thing, you know, going back to engineers, you know, a light bulb went out. He's like, go get it yourself. And I'm like, no, you go get it. Like, you're the electrician, you're the everything in the thing. And I get that, but like, you're sitting there not doing anything, and the interior is running around like crazy, trying to make sure we're maintaining the entire inside of that vessel. We have so much to touch and clean and make sure it looks immaculate, so that if we do get back to land and we drop these charter guests or owners and we have a 24-hour or less turnaround, that we're ready. So if you're sitting there as an engineer, and go check faucets when the guests are off board, go check to see if the light bulbs, stop pushing off so much on so many people. And I think that's the problem that people start to have. It's like, we're not seeing each other work. We're not seeing each other become team members. If you see the chef in the weeds, do their dishes. Who cares? We know that we're not supposed to. It's not in our job, you know, description, but like, you're watching them struggle. It's just common sense. Correct. And it's about teamwork. So like, do their dishes for them, help them clean. Hey, can I help you prep for something, you know? Because the chef is on their feet more than pretty much everybody on that.
No, 100%. You're more likely to actually help the person if you like the person. And the thing that most people, you know, should understand is that they employ people, like, let's say it's a seasonal position and you start the season in May. They're gonna hire you in April. You don't even have like 1 or 2 weeks to create like team building and everything. So you arrive on on the vessel in the middle of like the shit show, if I can call it like that, and you don't have like proper relationship with the person you work with.
You have to create it, and that's one thing that I've learned too over the years. So if you're the chef, and this is just my opinion of what I've seen, what do crew like? They like food. They like cookies. Make them cookies. I don't know why, for some reason, chefs have a hard time making cookies, and like, or something just small and sweet. And when you do that, they're like, oh man, the chef actually made us a cookie, or, you know, paid attention and like made us a fresh salad, or, you know what I'm saying? And not just throwing everything in a box and just passing it over. Now, all of a sudden, when they're coming in the galley, they're like, hey, what do you need? Can I help do your dishes? Or they'll start doing your dishes. They'll start sweeping. They'll start vacuuming 100%. For you. They'll start doing all these things for you. So those are the things that people need to really take initiative in their career and research. Research everything. No one can hand you. You can't say like, okay, we didn't have this development with the crew. Well, then figure it out. We've been doing this for years. What do all crew like? You know what I'm saying? And the same thing like chefs, or I mean, for the crew, we know what chefs need help in. It's not any different on any vessel. So it's like, take that time, catalog it, and like memorize and say, hey, how can we make other crew members better? And it's,
it's a process.
It is a process. And you need a leader to remind people to do that.
Obviously. No, the thing is, it's changing.
Yeah, it is changing.
Like, it's the first time in my career, like, it's been 7 years now for me in the yacht industry. It's the first year where I feel like the mindset is changing. Because we basically reached the edge. And we could not continue like that. So this change was inevitable. Unfortunately, we start to have like so many players, just like you and me, and like so many others that are initiating this change, you know, which is super beneficial.
I'm super excited meeting you and like hearing your stories, because again, we don't have people to vent or talk to. And when you're finding out that people are also having these problems, it feels good that you don't feel crazy.
No, obviously, you know, like,
and then supporting and bringing people together. And that's, I feel like Seanergy's doing that. You know, you're bringing a big group of people together and allowing us to network with each other.
That's the core of the mission. Like, every time I identify that someone is aligned with the value of making the industry safer, smarter, and more sustainable, I just approach them and I offer them to aggregate, you know, whatever they're doing in our platform, in our ecosystem, in our community, so we can work hand in hand. Because to me, like, the change is gonna come from like the alliance that we're gonna be able to build. So
correct. I totally agree. We have to build an alliance within the yachting industry. It's so important. And I don't want to leave the industry knowing that I didn't do anything to contribute. You know, I've been in the marine industry for over 20 years. I don't want to be like, screw it.
I mean,
Good luck.
After 3 years, I faced my first burnout in the industry, and I was like, should I quit? And then I paused a minute. I was like, you didn't just waste like 3 years of your life in this industry, taking so much shit with sexual harassment, mental harassment, to do actually nothing.
Yeah.
So that's what like I use as a fuel to actually build this entire project, because I just use my anger, my frustration, you know.
Yeah.
And that's where we are.
That's
4 years and a half
honestly,
after.
that's what it's supposed to be, though, too.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I always, like, whenever I'm training the people under me in all departments, I'm always saying, you know, if you're on a bad vessel, take it in.
Yeah.
Like, really take in what's going on, what don't you like about it, and how can you change it? You know what I'm saying? Like, you're figuring yourself out. It's like you were saying with your boundaries. I don't like this. I don't like that. Great. So now your next interviewing process, it's like, hey, these are things I don't like.
No, for sure.
You know, and you can get that out in the moment. So, like, it's so funny that our bad environment and chaos and toxicity like is actually who builds our character. It makes us stronger, and pushes us to be
businesses. The thing is, every time I was facing like a very difficult character in this industry, I was like, you're inspiring me in so many features, you know, like exactly. So I was like, continue. So you know, so no, at the end of the day, like in the moment it's really hard to handle. You pause a minute and you're like, okay, so because they are acting like this, if I do this as a feature in my platform, it's gonna help so many other people.
Correct. And so we have to be thankful for the idiots
exactly
no, honestly, and the toxic vessels that are out there.
So we've been able to design solutions because of those guys. So
and it creates problem solving. And that's huge in life, period. Like, you have to be able to problem solve. So when things go terribly wrong, you learn from that and you just become better. It's just same thing with safety equipment on board. Do people really know how to use safety? No, most people never had anything happen on board. You have to have wrong things happen. Your boat has to sink a little. You know, you have to drift a little. The anchor's not. You have to have those moments so that you can actually prepare yourself for something that catastrophically could happen, and you're prepared for
Obviously, it's not just the glitters, the parties, you know, and everything that we see on below deck, obviously. So
I mean, it's a long topic. You
can
talk for days on yachting, just
obviously
it's such a great industry, and I'm so proud to be part of it. I do love it. I mean, we get to see parts of the world that most people don't get to do. We do get spoiled in so many different ways.
It's a world of opportunities. I love it.
But there's a price to paradise.
No, for sure.
And it's
but because it has so much potential, and we are close to have it like being a dream industry, you know? And we can turn it into that.
We're going to. We're gonna
no, for sure. No, obviously. But it has so much potential to build like amazing careers, amazing people.
The first time going to the Palm Beach International Boat Show, I mean, it was a really good show. And I got to talk and interact with people that, you know, it is funny. At first it was like a little, I don't want to listen. And then once we started talking about things, like it fit. It just felt good to be at that show this year. It was a different feel. I can't put it to words on how it felt, but you know, I just felt good after it. And I've done 20 billion shows, and I've never felt that good after the West Palm one.
I actually had the West Palm and the Mid Trade with the Super Forum. That was super insightful. It was wonderful, and I can't wait to attend the next ones.
I know, I know.
So the next boat show that we're actually gonna be attending is gonna be Palma Boat Show. So we're gonna meet you there again. We really hope you enjoyed the talk. In the situation where you would like to take part in this podcast, just send us a DM, and we'll see you soon. Lisa, it was a pleasure to have you with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to
for the second time. So
perfect.
Bye everyone.
Bye.